Welcome to 2021 of the Business Not As Usual podcast. First episode of the new year. I am your host, Vince, and with me is the other host, Michael. Michael, how are you, my friend?
Here's your other host playing around with his lighting. So continue, Vince. I'm fooling around with my lighting.
No, and that's fine because we are doing video as well, so you need to look good. Yeah. Hair did, nails did, everything did.
I should have got my glam squad. Okay.
So first episode of the new year, just to put a timestamp on this. And we closed off in the last episode where we did that crossover with my other show, the Analysts After Work, where we did the airing of grievances and gratitude and our goals. So that I thought was a really good way to close the year.
Yeah.
But now we're talking about the beginning of a new year. And so we're going to do what, a lot of people do at the beginning of the new year, which is try to see into the future.
Predict the year ahead.
Well, and I don't want to say predict, because we're not trying to, these aren't guesses. But I actually want to, maybe we'll start with a little...
Should have clarified that before I put my list together.
A little shout out. Well, that's fine. But a little shout out to friend of the show, Lori Silverman, who is a futurist in data and in business. And, in conversation with Lori, back when we were allowed to travel and go to conferences, Lori and I had a conversation where she actually sort of talked me through how she does what she does. And I tried to use that in this exercise, but basically, just to sort of crudely summarize, what Lori does is she doesn't try to predict the future, but what she tries to do is put herself into the future and then look back. And so I'm not going to try to predict what is going to happen in 2025. But I'm going to try to imagine myself, put myself into 2025, and then look back at what happened in the intervening period. Now, Lori, if I ruin that, we'll have to have you back on so that you can articulate that much better than I did.
Yeah.
But thanks, Mike. But that's...
I'm not going that route. So this is going to be a...
Predictions for the year? Well, fine. You know what? Let's scrap the last.
I'm going to do me.
Do you? What are some of your predictions? What are some of the things you see in the coming year? And since you're going to do you, why don't you start us off, my friend?
So I'm going to start with what I think is going to happen over the course of this year going into 2022. One from a business and then a quote unquote transformation perspective, and then from what's going to happen with people.
Okay.
Right. The thing that you like to do, conferences, I think I'm going to have a prediction about that. And the ever popular, everyone going back to work. So I need to talk about that. So I'm going to start off with,
and actually, sorry, before you start, let's just clarify. We have not pre-discussed these,
as you can tell.
Right? No. I mean, but I don't know what you're going to say, and you don't know what I'm going to say.
I do not.
So it'll be interesting because already you've alluded to two of the things that I wanted to talk about. So it'll be interesting, and that's why I want to say we did not pre-discuss this. So this might be short if we are in full agreement, but we'll see. So I'm sorry, Mike. Please.
So I think there's been a lot of pressures on governments this year, obviously with COVID. And so there's going to be a lot of work around governments creating platforms and digital ecosystems, which I'll put a few of these together, which is going to have a lot to do with digital identity, which I know people get crazy about because they think the government is going to be following them around. But I think the people that are working on these are best of intentions to try and actually give better services. And just in general, I'll go along with that digital cybersecurity And the reason I want to put those three together is, and this is like personal, anytime something happens, like there's a lockdown in your city, there's something happens with COVID, the amount of scams that come out, like it's like predicted. Like I was talking to a cybersecurity guy this morning, and they like cringe because they know the attacks like go off the roof. So be careful out there, because as soon as there's like these announcements like we're running out of vaccines here in Ontario, all of a sudden hell breaks loose. So those are my first three in terms of like digital and what's going on in the world, and where I think governments have to be running to in this year.
Yeah, I cybersecurity for me is one of those really interesting topics. It's something that I would like to know more about, and not so much the technical aspect of cybersecurity, but the social aspect of cybersecurity, and like how people can as you've alluded to, create panic in a population with, and I mean we all know, if you get an email from a Nigerian prince, you don't click on it, right? We know that it's been around forever. But there's a lot more sophisticated scams,
big time,
that don't follow that prescribed format and are much harder to detect, especially for vulnerable populations, the elderly, just people that aren't aware of these things out in the world, right? Like, so I think that's a really interesting one, and I do think there's going to be more of a emphasis on cybersecurity going forward. But again, not so much the technical, but the social aspect of cybersecurity.
And the super importance of it. It was always something that, and Vince and I, you and I have worked together on these things where we're like, these guys are just getting in our way of us doing cool things. And I think we've both come around to go, maybe these things, we need to be mindful of them, and we need to be wary, and we need to take some advice around, if it's not so cool, that's okay, because this is all part of the package of moving to a new world, that the cybersecurity needs to be there. So those are my first three: identity, security, and then the government trying to do more to be able to give services without the face-to-face.
Which is another interesting one, right? Like I know we talk about this stuff a lot, but governments, the governments that are engaged in actually improving the lives of citizens through service delivery is very admirable, because truly they don't have to. Like, they don't need to be easy to work with. You need your license. They can make you jump through whatever hoop they want. So the fact that they are trying, I think is admirable, because things should be easy. Like, getting a license or completing a transaction with a government agency should not be a source of pain.
No, it should be yes, it should be much easier. And I think that's but that's the dichotomy, right? Everybody wants things to be easier, but then they don't want the government to track them. And so this is where when governments come up with, we're going to do digital identity or a digital identity scheme, because I know that I've had a few people, when they announced it and they thought it was a great thing, they got killed on the social medias, because everybody's thinking that the government is like going to put a chip in their shoulder. Whereas though the government's actually trying to listen and give you better service without you needing to go to the licensing office. Right. And it highlighted it this year about, I don't know about you, Vince, but here in Ontario, people were given like some leeway on getting their, here in Ontario, you have to get a sticker, Like, I don't know, I think it's like $120 per car when your license plate's due, and that goes towards roads and things like that.
Yeah.
And then because we couldn't go in because of COVID, they're like, okay, we're gonna give you some leeway on you don't have to get it by your birthday, which is when it all comes due.
Right.
And man, I see people that have now like 2019. I see people that are like like they're nowhere close. And so they're trying to get away with these things where they can't just go online and do it. So
yeah. And I mean, on that note, I was I guess fortunate enough that last year was when my license was up for renewal. Like I had to get a new picture.
You got lucky.
So
yes.
I got a new picture. You're good lucky. For the next, I think it's 5 years or whatever. So, but yeah.
Just on that note, there was a funny story about a guy who he tried to use like a Sharpie to change the date on his sticker. That was here in Toronto, actually. I think that one took the cake over the guy who didn't get a sticker renewal since the mid-'80s. I always gotten away with that.
You're gonna have to repeat that one, Mike, because you glitched out. So go back to Sharpie, and we'll just cut this out of the podcast.
Anyway, all right, your turn.
No, go ahead. The Sharpie. Go tell the story.
The Sharpie. The guy instead of just going to get his license or getting it online like a normal person, tried to change his date using a Sharpie on his sticker, and that took over the Stupid Meter award over the guy who hadn't got a sticker since the mid-'80s. Right. Which I don't know how we got away with that, but also very funny.
Right. Because you need to prove there's a lot of stuff. A lot to unpack.
Right, your turn.
So if we're sticking in the world of work at the moment, I've got a few, but there's one that I sort of want to highlight because it's sort of the macro, the biggest one. And it's around and you highlighted the digital and the cybersecurity, like very, very in your lane. I'm also going to stick in my lane. I think that the role of proper analysis in work is going to be at the forefront. And it's because I think, or the way that from my perspective, it's almost like we're dealing with so much less in terms of resources. And, there's a need to deploy solutions that add value right away. So we don't have as much time. We don't have as much ability to deploy a solution and then fix it as we go. Like it's almost got to be ready from Jump Street. And so I think you're going to see the need for the business analysis skill to jump to the forefront. And within that skill, you've got sub skills like, creative thinking, critical thinking, and all that, like all those things that they tell you are key skills. But I think a lot more organizations are going to invest in an analysis practice because they need to. They need to deliver solutions that are right, and that means not doing as much as far as experimentation. Now, the downside to that is that you may see less innovation. You may see fewer organizations taking risks. And I think it's sort of time boxed, but because we're talking about 2021, it's time boxed to this year, and I would say maybe next year as well. Innovation's not going away, but I think it's going to fall to the back burner while organizations just try to stay afloat and try to continue to deliver services, and that means doing the right thing, right? And as we know, doing the right thing is always the right thing, right? So I think you're going to see a demand now. I don't know if that manifests itself in like a full blown like BA practice. I don't know if it just becomes an emphasis on, you know, building new skills and expanding the reach of that way of thinking, that mindset into other areas. But I think analysis is going to play a very, very key role in the future. Now, this came out of a conversation that I had, and I'm trying to get a guest on the show, hopefully for the next episode, where, you know, the call was for BAs to really hammer home that they're good at analysis. And I think, yeah, that's part of it, but part of it is also, you know, what I've been saying for about a year now, which is we actually need to get more BAs in leadership roles. And so we need to have that way of thinking and that mindset in at the decision-making table versus just being an executioner and getting work done. So I think that this is sort of a big one. And I think the organizations that do invest in maximizing the potential of strategic and business analysis are going to have a much easier road if they then, and this is another sort of dependency, if they let the people that are doing that work do what they can do versus tying them into, and maybe this is a good segue into a people or a cultural discussion, because I don't think anyone would argue that things do need to change in the world of work.
Yes, they do. Before we move from that,
yes,
to dovetail what you were talking about in terms of business analysis, there's been a lot of talk around hyperautomation, and that is anything that can be, any process that can be automated so we could free up people to do other things. Yeah, and so I would assume that would need the full the bear of all business and BAs to work on that, so that then we can redeploy people to other parts of the organization where these processes that don't need to be manual. So what are your thoughts on that? Because that is that's on my list only because I read it a few times and I put it there more for discussion than I thought it was a more of a prediction.
Yeah, and I mean that's it's interesting, right? And this is not going to be anything new to you. It's not going to be anything new to the people that have listened to episodes in the past. When this comes out of my mouth, let's not default to automation. So let's not just assume that we need to automate something. One of the big sort of pushback against analysis or BAs specifically, the role, is that, you know, it's seen as a role that is there to to establish the business need. But the piece that's missing in a lot of this work is the analysis and the asking of why. So if you came to me, Mike, and said, we need hyper automation, we need to automate this process, my question would be, okay, like, why do we need it's not just to say, oh, okay, let's figure out how to automate it. It's about, okay, why do we need to automate this process? Why do we need this process at all? And so it's actually pushing the envelope a little bit to understand the business need behind the process, and then figure out. So, like, again, I
totally agree. I think in terms of going through that process, that you would get rid of all like, you either keep the ones you need, do them differently, or get rid of the one. And you've said this before, like eliminate before you automate. Yeah. Let's say we go through that process. Do you see? So let's, in a perfect world, that happened, right? You had all those conversations. Now these ones are left that are ripe for automation. So we can, if we have 1,000 people that work for us and 300 do these things that are the same
Add
thing
no
over and over.
value. Yeah.
And we can redeploy them to other thinking jobs. I'm not saying get rid of them, upskill them somewhere else. What is your thought on actually hyper automation happening in 2021? Because it's a nice word, but there's a lot that has to happen to get there. It's not just buying RPA.
No, and that's the thing, right? I don't see it happening in 2021.
Okay.
I don't see it happening now. The work can start in 2021, and it should.
I think the hard work starts, but I don't think there's a deployment with all the cool. I was going to say another word, but we're PG. All the cool stuff.
Stuff. No, and like I call that the virtuous cycle. Right? It's not about eliminating people, and this has been part of my Six Sigma spiel for years. Like, it's not about eliminating people in a process. It's about figuring out what you need to do, to add value, and then taking that delta, taking that difference, and deploying it in another area of the business that creates a virtuous cycle. So that you've got continuous improvement happening all the time. Yeah. So it's not like, it scares me when business leaders look at something like Six Sigma as a way of cutting head count. Like, I mean, you could do that, but it's not the point. It's to drive continuous improvement, right? You can take in your example those 300 people and put them in, a customer-facing role where now they are reducing the burden on your customer service area. You could put them in an innovation center where they have the opportunity to create new things. Like, you could do so much with those resources because they're no longer tied to doing stuff that really doesn't add value because it's been automated. I just think I think a lot of the thought needs to happen especially if you haven't started it. This is not a buy a product, deploy it, and you're good to go. Like, it takes time to teach the AI, to teach the robot how to do what you need to do. It takes time.
It's funny because I was going to say on the digital side, in every business case, it's like, we're going to do digital so we can have efficiencies, so we can not have as many people. Yeah, which is not the point. The point is, in 2021, that's how you do business. It's not like, that's it. That, like, stop. If you happen to be able to do things quicker, faster, and not need processes along the way, those people need to go somewhere else. Or right? So it's not, the end goal is not just to get rid of people by doing digital or eliminating process or making them better. That's not the goal. Is just to be better at business. So
well, and I mean, but
that's another story for another podcast.
No, but that's the problem, is like, in order to sell that concept, you need a business case, and the business case is usually driven by financial metrics, right? That's the problem. So you could say, in the future, it would be great if we made decisions on projects and business cases on metrics that are more than just financial. Right.
Yes.
So, all right. So that's sort of the world of work. Let's talk about people, and let's talk about culture. What do you got there, Mikey?
So I have like two that kind of go together. One is this concept of work from anywhere. I'm not going to say work from home. Work from anywhere, which goes together with, as vaccines are rolled out and we get back to some, like, being actually able to seeing each other and shaking hands and all those things, it doesn't mean we're all going to go back to, some high rise, as John Mellencamp said.
John Cougar.
John Cougar. Yes. Sorry. I didn't put John Cougar in there.
I don't know John Mellencamp. I know John Cougar Mellencamp.
I'm sorry, Vince. And I don't want to say work from home, because that has a connotation now that you're working, but you're also doing a whole bunch of other things, which people are doing now. But when kids are back at school and there's daycares and all these things, you're working. You're back to working 9 to 5 or whatever your hours are, but you may not happen to be at the address that you were originally, like before last March. So that goes with, now how do companies move away from purely working like we've gone from purely working in a physical location to purely all being virtual. And now there has to be this, how do we do it when people are both at the physical space and a physical space somewhere else, not in the big high rise? So work from anywhere and hybrid working are two things that are going to have to be tackled like this year, because once these vaccines are rolled out, I'm thinking next fall there's going to be this, all right, now we got to get back to how we work.
Yeah. And that does sort of lead into which is very similar, which I think there is going to be that pull back to the old way. And I don't think there's any going back. I think a lot of businesses will try, but it's going to be too hard. Because even when things are back to normal and vaccines are deployed, like, there's still trauma. There's still some psychological, mental trauma that has taken place. People are not going to want to rush back to the office. Not everybody is, at least. I don't want to overgeneralize and say nobody wants to, but there's going to be weird feelings of I don't know, can I shake that guy's hand? Can I have lunch with her? Like, there's still going to be that underlying trauma. So I think organizations that want to handle that well need to leave enough space for their returning staff to feel comfortable in that environment. But to that point, I don't know that there is any full-time going back. And I think the implications of that are positive, not negative. Because if you really think about it, the problem with this during this pandemic period, from a work perspective, is not that we're distributed; it's that's the only choice. Right. It's there is no alternative. Versus, hey, Mike, we need to meet on Friday. Do you want to just do it here, or should we meet in the office? Right. Like, I think that presents a very, very different feeling to the participants. But I don't know that there is ever going to be a going back, and I think that then opens the door to, and this is how organizations can benefit from this. You're no longer tied into business hours. Like, your business hours potentially are 24/7. You're no longer tied into geographic limitations. So if you want to hire someone that does a particular job and they just happen to live in South Africa, well, then you can hire them and they can either accommodate your work time, or you can accommodate theirs, or you can meet somewhere in the middle. Like, the implications of not being in a physical co-located working milieu are huge. And I think that, you like that? And I think they're mostly positive.
So I think, and I think it's with anything, and you'll probably appreciate this. What problem are we trying to solve by people going back to work? And I'm not saying that people who work in offices shouldn't go back to work, but if you're just saying, here's the solution, go back to work, and then you're looking for a problem, it's just like solving any problem. But if you're trying to solve a particular problem, then those are the things that you try to address, right? So there's been conversations around, are we going to go back these many days, all these things. But if I'm just going to go back to the office and my team is not there, and I just stay in my office and work virtually, like on Zoom, then that was a wasted trip to the office, because I just stayed in.
Right.
Instead of being at my home office, I went to another office and then sat in the same room. So what was the point? But if we're trying to solve a particular problem, like we need to meet as a team once a week, then it makes sense because we're all there together. Not we take different days and then go in and go, I was in my 1 day a week. Well, that doesn't make any sense.
Right.
So
you know what you just did there, Mikey?
Business analysis.
That was business analysis right there. Like, what is the need? What is the problem that you're trying to solve? Right? Because you're right. To go in when you're still going to be sitting at a desktop or laptop or whatever,
doesn't make any sense.
I can do that anywhere. I don't need to physically be in my office. I can be at a Starbucks. I could be at a co-working, location. I could be anywhere. But what is it that you're trying to achieve? So if you're trying to build team camaraderie, if you're trying to introduce a new team member, now it makes sense to meet.
Yes.
Right. And so I think, I don't know that, like, and I've heard those conversations too. Well, should we go back 1 day a week or 2 days a week? What is it that you're trying to achieve by going back? Because maybe the answer should be, we're not going to go back except when we need to on an ad hoc. Exactly. Right. So yeah, it comes back to this is what I'm saying. The skill of analysis is going to take on a more prominent role because of these questions. Like, what is it that you're trying to achieve? And, a lot, and again, not to overgeneralize, a lot of business leaders don't look at it that way. They look at the perception of, oh, well, we need to be in the office 4 out of the 5 days because people will look to me to set the tone. And, this thing isn't going away. And if it does, there will be another one. So that's part of our 2024 prediction. There will be another pandemic. I hope I'm wrong there. But I don't know. I think it's been too long. I think, if you think back to the beginning or the middle of March last year, when the world did go to hell, it's going to be 3 weeks and then we're back.
Well, that was the big, I think the day I left, I was part of the transition. See you in 2 weeks. Right. Well, there's a prediction gone wrong.
Right. So, and I think if that had happened, we wouldn't be having this conversation today, because I don't think enough time will have passed where this way of working would have taken hold. It's by the time we're back, it's 1.5 years. That's a long ass time. That's a long time. And people will have seen the benefit of, working this way. And I agree with you. I don't like the working from home. I mean, I'd love to get out and have the option of, sitting in a coffee shop, or because it's, anyways.
So, early in the pandemic, there was this, like, you're not working from home. You're working from home in a pandemic, right?
You're at home trying to work during a global pandemic.
I wasn't really getting it, but now I'm getting it. Like, like, there's all these things that needed to happen, and leeway, and because of all the things that are happening, everyone's at the house. But eventually, when we come out of that, you're not like at home doing 18 things. It's like you just happen not to be at the address of your company, but you're expected to be working the hours you would work as if you were at that building. And so what does that look like? What does that feel like? So I think
well, and that in and of itself is problematic, because there is a much more physical strain on video meeting versus meeting in person.
For sure.
Right. So a lot of the studies that I've read cite, if you're doing about 4 hours of Zoom or virtual calls a day, like that's equivalent to 8 hours.
Yes.
Right. And so, but we still haven't caught on to that.
No, we just keep hammering it.
I know that I've got
hammering those meetings
6-7 hours a day of video meetings, but then like think about the psychological toll and the physical toll and the mental toll that that's taking on you. Because I know for me, by the end of the day, I'm burnt. I'm done. And that's a feeling that's a feeling I wouldn't get usually until the end of the year, and now I'm getting it like at the end of the first week of the year.
Right.
I'm done, man. Call 2021. I'm done. I'm just gonna phone it in for the rest of the year.
It a week. The first week is already. I'm
done. I'm done. I'm interested to know. So that's. I mean, you've heard now our perspectives.
I have one more.
I'm interested. Oh, I'm sorry. I was gonna start closing there.
I think it was. I think this will be near and dear to your heart. So maybe we won't. Hybrid conferences.
Oh.
Like I know many of the people that listen to this show are friends and attend conferences and speak at conferences. Yeah. So for 2021 and beyond, I think the hybrid conference is going to be, I don't know how you do it. I'll leave it to the professionals, but I think everyone being in Vegas is, it might happen in like 4 years. But I don't, for the foreseeable future, I think there's going to be this, some of these will be virtual and, we'll be doing our BBC thing again from our home offices.
Right.
So what do you, I mean, you're the expert more than I am. So.
Yeah. I mean, I would question my level of expertise, but I would say, I would say for if we're scoping to 2021, you are correct. I actually don't think it's hybrid events. I think it's virtual events.
Okay.
Maybe toward the end of the year, you might start to see some in-person stuff, but I think even that depends on when and where it's happening.
Right.
So there's that aspect of it. I mean, I know for me, part of the reason I was okay with taking a step back from speaking this year as a goal and focusing on the book that we're writing, as well as the other book that I'm working on. Look for it soon. And if you're a publisher, we'd love to talk to you. But part of the reason I was okay with stepping back was I actually don't enjoy the virtual stuff as much as I do the live stuff. And I'll give an example. So I've got a talk that I do. It's based on a few stories in Seinfeld, and it's called "Ugly Babies and What to Do with Them." And it's about talking about things that, or acknowledging things, problems in business that we know to be true, but we don't acknowledge publicly. Well, when I do it live, it's so much fun. Everyone gets into it. I do my really lame Seinfeld impression. Like, it's a lot of fun. I've done it virtually, and it gets to a really dark place very quickly. And so I don't get that same feeling. So I don't enjoy virtual. But I think this is then a challenge for those organizers, those conference organizers, to figure out how to create an experience. Because a lot of them, what they did was they just said, well, we're moving online, and they just tried to port everything over. What they need to do is reimagine.
They need to reimagine
the experience, right?
Yes.
And so, I'll do a little shameless plug here. I have been one of the things that I'm working on this year is an event. It was sort of conceived of as a festival. With a friend in the UK, Adrian Reed, who's a big name in the business analysis space in the UK and in Europe. But we've come up with this idea for this event called Serendipity. And it's just like, let's put people together and see what happens. It's going to be structured. It's not like a free-for-all, battle royale. But it's like, what if we didn't do the traditional conference thing? What if we just, put on a panel a digital expert, a cybersecurity expert, a UX expert, and a change expert? Let's put them all together on a panel and let's ask them some questions. and see how those different perspectives are synergistic, but also how they oppose and how they can work together. So it's this idea of like collisions of really cool stuff. So, but we're conceiving it as an online virtual event that we will then port into the real world, quote, real world, when that option is available. So it's almost a digital first event, right? Mm-hmm. That we can pull off in the real world, but it's digital first. And so you will, I think you will start to see a lot more of those hybrid events, but I think that's a beyond 2021 conversation.
Oh, for sure.
So yeah, I'm good. I've been talking for 5 hours straight, so at this point I'm good.
All right.
But I want to know for those that are listening, what are some of your predictions for the coming year? And if you want to go beyond, Mazel Tov. But what do you see coming for the world of work, and people and cultural implications for business and for individuals? Let us know. Hit us up on LinkedIn or at our respective websites. For that, Michael, this has been the Business Not As Usual podcast.
First one of the year in the books.
First one of the year. We will catch you in the next one.
See ya. See you later.